Hi, I'm Michelle Grzoulis, and I'm the president of the foundations at Rochester Regional Health. And I'm joined today for our Facebook Live chat by Mike Waller, Director of Sustainability at Rochester Regional Health. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
So Mike and I have talked a lot about sustainability, not as part of this, but because it's something that we're focused on as a health system. And we're lucky to have Mike, who's helping us as a system think differently about recycling and sustainability. So let me also remind the audience that you're welcome to ask questions. Please insert them in the comments section, and I'll take a couple breaks and we'll ask questions of Mike. But with that, let's start. Let's jump right in. So how did you get involved in sustainability?
Well, let's see. I got involved in sustainability many years ago in my undergrad. I remember I started doing research on hydrogen fuel cells. And I thought the whole idea of a hydrogen economy sounded really cool to me.
Interesting.
And then after I kind of dug into that, I got really interested in solar energy.
Okay.
And spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to work those two together. So my background is in engineering, and kind of went through all my education till I landed at RIT, working on my doctorate in sustainability in hydrogen fuel cells.
Wow.
And once I graduated that, I started here.
Interesting. So your PhD is in sustainability?
Correct. It's
from RIT?
It's in sustainability from RIT, but my focus there was on hydrogen fuel cells.
Okay. Are we doing anything with hydrogen fuel cells here?
We are not doing anything with
just
hydrogen
getting that
fuel
out in the
cells
open, because I wouldn't know if we were or we weren't. But let's talk about Rochester Regional Health. So you joined the organization a couple years ago, and your primary focus is on helping us become more sustainable and green as an organization, and we've set a very robust goal for that. Why don't you share that with the audience? What's our goal?
Yeah, so we set a goal just last year. We announced it publicly at the same time that we cut the ribbon for our first solar array, and the goal is to to purchase 100% of our electricity from renewable sources by the year 2025.
Is that realistic?
Yes, it is realistic.
Good.
So part of my job convincing our leadership to actually set that goal was to provide a plan for doing that. And so part of that plan involves reducing our electricity consumption,
okay,
as well as building renewable energy production on site as well as off site. And then there's always going to be a little bit of leeway because we keep adding new buildings,
yeah,
left and right, or another practice joins our organization.
Okay.
And so for some of those practices, until we can build enough renewable energy capacity for those buildings, we'll have to purchase it from some pre-built place.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what are we doing at big lofty levels, right? What are we trying to do as a health system? Because I think there's some very micro things that people are doing in terms of recycling. We'll get to those later. But what are the big picture things we're doing as a health system? Solar panels are one.
Yeah. So when people think of sustainability, they always think of renewable energy, solar power, wind power, and they always think of recycling.
Okay.
So those are big parts of sustainability, but sustainability is really defined as meeting the needs of the current generations without compromising the needs of future generations. So it's a very broad topic, and so we're doing stuff in the energy space and reducing our waste. We're also doing things with building them to LEED standards.
Okay. I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
So give a couple examples, like in the waste space. What are we doing specifically?
So waste space is all about reducing. So the mantra is reduce, reuse, recycle.
Mm-hmm.
And just by reducing waste, it just saves a ton of money. And in addition to being good for the environment.
Yeah.
So we're in healthcare. I learned, since I came here, my background's not healthcare.
I know what you're going to share.
There are 16 different waste streams that we track, which is crazy, all those different waste streams.
That's
and
amazing.
They boil down to three main ones: hazardous waste, municipal solid waste, that's the stuff that you put out at your curb, and then recycling. So all the different streams of recycling that we have. And most of that's just cardboard. So cardboard and plastics make up the bulk of that, is what I guess, and office paper. So we're trying to reduce the amount of waste we send to the landfills. So that's the hazardous waste as well as the municipal solid waste, and trying to increase the amount that we recycle.
Yeah.
But it's always about reduce, reuse, recycle. So that's the trying to reduce first.
we had, in my office, we did a little bit of a project with Mike a couple months back where we actually got rid of all of our garbage cans and all of our recycling bins in each of our individual offices in an attempt to make people aware of how much waste you actually create and increase steps by getting up and going to the garbage in the central area. So it was when I think my team learned the most about how simple it is to sort of take small baby steps but make a big difference. And we've reduced our total waste output over the last 6 months significantly.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. I forgot the exact numbers of how many bins in your office space, but there was one department we went through, did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So we came in, we collected waste for 2 or 3 days, and then we sorted it into what's recyclable, what's not, as well as what you guys were actually recycling, to figure out the contamination rates. And it is very eye-opening. And there was one department over at RGH where we did the same thing, where they went from 50 bins down to 7.
It's amazing.
And so we did that waste audit, then we took all the bins out of the offices, went to centralized locations. And so now when people, they have to get up off their desks and take their trash to either the recycling bin or the landfill bin.
Yeah.
And that whole process of walking there, carrying it, you start to think about, where am I actually going to put this? Is this recyclable?
Is it recyclable?
Not? And we saw when we did that in your office a huge improvement rate. I think it was like 95% of the items that were recyclable were actually recycled.
Yeah.
And then the overall rate was somewhere around like 50 or 60% of all the stuff that you guys have can actually be recycled.
We made it a game too, which was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
So let's talk about Reedman. We're in the Reedman campus, and this is one area where you talked about the solar panels. How many solar panels do we have today at Reedman?
We have 1,432 solar panels up on our rooftop. It's about a half megawatt. It's a little under a half megawatt, and that takes about somewhere, close to 45 acres of roof space.
And we're not necessarily powering this building with that solar array, right, as an equivalent, but we're powering our labs.
Yeah, right. In a very physical sense, the electrons that come out of the solar panels are just going back into our building.
Yeah.
But in a metering sense, we meter the power that's generated from that solar array and then apply that to 20 different buildings across the Rochester area.
Which I think is really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really amazing. So let me stop and see if there's any questions that have come in.
People associate Rochester with being gloomy and not the most sunny place.
I asked this question too.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just talk about how
you don't need the sun to create? You don't need the sun to create solar energy.
Sure. Yeah. People do associate Rochester with not being very gloomy, but one of the countries in the world that has the largest percentage of solar energy part of their total energy is actually Germany, which is much less sunnier than Rochester. And they talk about sun in terms of sun hours, which is the total amount of hours in a year where the sun is shining at its shiniest.
Yep.
And so Rochester has about 1,200 sun hours in a year. And so there are some suburbs out in California, kind of around the San Francisco area, which have very similar amount of sun hours. So it's not the best, but
it's also not the worst.
It's not the worst. In Arizona, there are ones with 2,000 sun hours, which is a lot more, but 1,200 is still pretty high. There are places where they have like 600.
And what you taught me too is that you don't necessarily need, the sun during daylight hours, even with the clouds, you're still generating still capturing solar energy.
Yeah. In Rochester, we get about on average 4 hours of 100% of the solar array's output every single day.
So I want to digress for a moment. What's the best part of your job? What do you love most about what you do?
I really, so my background is in renewable energy. I really enjoy working on those types of projects. I also enjoy telling people that all of these projects, they're good for the environment, they're good for our community, and by the way, they save us a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I like it when people, the light bulb clicks in their minds.
Yeah.
And really, I think my favorite part about the job is actually working with all of the wonderful people here.
Yeah.
I was surprised coming from an engineering background, having no idea what healthcare was like, and being a little fearful on how people would view me, would view my role, if they'd be for or against me. And I was pretty surprised to find that most people who work in healthcare actually go into healthcare to help people.
Yeah, and this is also very altruistic as well.
And the whole message that I'm trying to talk about, all the work that I'm trying to work on, fits perfectly in with that mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's been great. Everybody's very supportive, and we've been able to do a lot.
Well, I know you're personally passionate about it. We've had so many conversations about it, so I wanted to ask you that because I think it's interesting to be able to pair what you're personally passionate about with a career, and I think a lot of folks in healthcare do that as well, which is great. So we're going to talk about props for a moment.
All right.
Phil stocked me up with a whole bunch of garbage props. I think one of the most common questions in my office still struggles with this, and we have a sort of a recycling czar in our office who helps us understand what's recyclable and what's not, Stephanie. So shout out to Stephanie Daly, who does an awesome job at that. But it is confusing for people. It's genuinely really confusing. So I'm going to hold up a couple things, and you're going to tell me whether or not they're recycling. So we've all seen these.
So to give a quick caveat,
Yeah.
Everything is recyclable, and they're just there are different ways of finding the places to put them. So styrofoam is one of the things that's the most difficult to find a place to recycle it. And so that's something that you cannot put in your recycle bin. If you do, it'll just be sorted out and thrown away anyways.
Okay. So general rule is this goes in the garbage if you really want to save.
That should go in the trash.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is another styrofoam cup. I
yeah.
don't even like styrofoam cups, so we should ban them completely.
Now, if people who are really hardcore about it, there are places where you can take your styrofoam, squeeze it up, and mail it, and you can get it recycled.
Okay.
If you Google, if you search online, you'll find it.
Clorox wipes?
So if it's empty, you can recycle that package. I would take the top off.
Okay. Rinse it out?
If you think it needs to. I mean, it's pretty clean, right?
Do the numbers really mean anything on the bottom?
They do. Yep. That's so all the number 2s. That's number 2 HDPE, high density polyethylene. They'll at the recycling sorting center where that'll get sent. If you put it on your curbside bin,
Yep.
they'll sort all the number 2s in one place and everything else in the other places. It's also recyclable.
Okay.
I wonder if that has a number on it. See, got a number right here. So that's number 6.
Okay. So if you look for the triangle and it's there, then technically you should say, okay, I can put that on and if I have a question, that goes in my recycling bin.
Right.
So triangle,
Yep.
recyclable.
Those are also recyclable.
Or if there's Coke or
Yeah, anything with food, you want to clean the food out because what happens is when it gets to the sorting center and the people who are sorting these things, I mean, they're doing a lot really fast, and so if they see something that's covered with food, they're just going to toss it. They're not going to put it in the recycling.
This is
bin.
one I've wondered about at home recently.
So all in New York State, all of the places that supply those are also required to provide an easily accessible way for homeowners to recycle those. And so like at Home Depot or Lowe's,
you can drop your
they have a bin sort of near the entrance where you can bring those
Okay.
in.
Just a
So
couple
the question, what about the Lysol wipes themselves?
The wipes themselves are not recyclable. No.
Because of the fabric or
And don't
because of the
flush them
chemical? Yeah, I know, I've learned that. But because of the chemical or because of you think of the fabric? I don't know.
I'm not sure what the fabric is made of. If it's like a paper-based product or if it's like a plastic cloth almost. But
Paper. This is an easy one. This is recyclable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But here's the question that we struggled with in our office is it better for us, so we know we have paper waste in our office, is it better to shred it or is it better just to put it in a recycling bin or does it not matter?
It doesn't really matter. It'll get shredded at the end of the day anyways before it gets turned into something else.
Okay.
But I wouldn't waste the time shredding it. Just put it
Okay. This one's an easy one. It's made of paper, like these.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they think if something is coated with wax, and this used to be the case, you weren't allowed to recycle it. So once it got to landfill, went to the sorting center, it just get tossed in the landfill anyways. But now they are
Even if they're in
recyclable,
plastic.
even if they have Microsoft and that.
Just put my hand over that. Forks, plastic forks, spoons, knives.
So technically those are recyclable. However, the sorting facilities do not want you to put them in the recycling bin because they get stuck in all the machines and then they fling out and could potentially fly into somebody's eye.
Okay. But what should
So
we
try to
do
avoid
in our
that.
office environment? Put them in the garbage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And usually those are covered in food. If you could just not use the plastic cutlery, that would be best.
Okay. And last but not least, these plastic bins. Which,
Same thing. You just have to rinse them out.
And that's the general rule that we've been following in the office is if you have anything with food in it, rinse it out before you put it in the recycling bin for plastic, so that you increase the probability that it will actually be recycled, right? That's the general rule. Okay.
And then also, so again, recycling is great, but first, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're trying to do in your office, I don't know if this had the effect, but when you take away those trash bins, sometimes that encourages people to figure out how they can reduce.
Yeah.
So, plastic cutlery, I have a metal fork and spoon at my desk.
Yeah, and you just rewash that.
It, right?
The other area, we didn't talk about it, and I don't think we're going to spend a lot of time on it, but the other thing that I think is really helpful too is managing your print volume by using the mechanisms within our print devices to control just automated print. Do secure print or some kind of print at the device where you're able to say, do I really need that? One, question whether or not you really need to print, but then also really try to manage stuff just sitting at the printer and getting thrown out, because that's just wasted paper.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy when you think about such a large organization like us. Each piece of paper that's printed, whether it has one letter on it or even if it just kind of comes through the printing machine, it costs anywhere, depending on if it's black and white or color, 2.5 to 5 cents per piece of paper,
print.
right? And so those add up very fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's just a huge cost savings. And I think when people start to realize, I just printed 100 pages, that was like $2, and I do that multiple times a day.
Yeah, yeah.
That adds up really fast once you really think about, there are thousands of people doing that every single day.
I know.
So yes, like you said, printing double-sided or using if somebody does have it at their company, you scan your badge.
Yep. Which is
you
what
have
we
to
have.
scan it before you print.
Yeah.
Those are great mechanisms to help reduce the cost and help the environment.
It's all about changing behaviors, really,
right.
And teaching people to think differently. So what's your advice to folks who are listening, either who are RH employees who say, okay, what can I do in my own environment? I think you've highlighted a couple things. Or folks in the community, what are some really simple things that you might not have mentioned that you would say, this is what people should think about?
Yeah, I think one of the simple things that we do a lot, especially on the waste side, are getting rid of bins, different waste bins, whether it's at your house, in your office. That's a very simple step that once you just remove those, it forces you to think, and it forces you to get up and walk to these other bins, which is also good for you. You shouldn't be sitting around all day. And so that's one thing. Another thing is lights are very simple. LEDs are becoming more and more mainstream, but fluorescent lights and incandescent lights in the U.S., they consume about 20 to 30% of all the electricity in the entire U.S. is just from lighting. And so LED technology, cuts that in half at least, sometimes even more. So we can literally reduce the entire country's electricity consumption by 15% or so just by changing out light bulbs.
And we've changed how many light bulbs here?
I think the official number is somewhere like 26,000, but I know we're doing a lot of projects as we speak, and so it's probably well over 30,000 at this point.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And just by way of trivia before we wrap up, how much of our produce that we purchase is grown from local farms?
For us it's about 20%, and in the Rochester area that's purely driven by seasonality.
Yeah.
So 20% of the year we can grow produce. Otherwise we have to import it. And so one of the things that folks at home can do to kind of change that, it's a little bit more difficult in a large office type setting, is to but you can do at home, is to purchase from local farms year-round. And so there are crops that can grow year-round, but they're not always the crops we think of. Like we always want lettuce all the time throughout the year,
but
it only grows in the summer, right? So if you're buying lettuce, it's coming from somewhere else. And in fact, in Rochester, pretty much all the lettuce you buy comes from somewhere else anyways. But there are lots of hardy crops, like Brussels sprouts, for example, that grow great during the colder seasons. And
your squashes, your kales.
Squashes, kales, all of those things. And so we can all, very healthy, very tasty, different options. But we can all change the recipes that we use throughout the year to get it to 100%.
So as we're wrapping up, I think one of the things I would love for you to share with the audience as well is, if they want to learn more about it, we have a link on our homepage, correct, for sustainability?
Mm-hmm.
So there's resources there. People can get in touch with you directly through there.
Yep. Yeah, you can get in touch with me. There's a link to send a message. There are a bunch of resources. We're trying to expand that. That website's pretty new.
Yeah.
And I've also learned wasn't experienced. The websites are fairly challenging to craft. So we're still working on that, but we're adding more and more resources as we move forward. Yeah.
Well, thank you for spending some time with us today. Phil, any questions that have come in? So I think that's it for today. Mike, again, Director of Sustainability at Rochester Regional Health, Mike Waller, thank you very much for what you're doing for us as a community and as a system. Really appreciate it, and great to learn more about it.
Yeah, thank you.